Welcome to Ndini, which is a platform where we're sharing the stories of inspiring, trailblazing, and groundbreaking women of African descent who are doing their part to change the narrative on what it means to be African and especially being an African woman. And I'm so privileged to be joined by an amazing filmmaker today we're actually right here at the Toronto International Film Festival where her film has just had its world premiere. And Hawa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
How's your experience been in Toronto so far?
Good, warm, if the breeze is a bit chilly, but okay.
So tell us about the film that you were screening.
The documentary that my co-director and I premiered is called Silas. And it's the portrait of a community activist who is working with a group of, we'll call them citizen journalists, and technology to gather evidence to force the hand of government to make better choices.
So you talked about having a co-producer. Who's your co-producer?
Anjali Nair.
Okay, and how did that collaboration or relationship come about?
Well, Anjali and I have known each other for, I think, a little over a decade. And she says this, she always says this, and I just sort of roll my eyes because I think, unfortunately, that's true. We met at the premiere of the Nairobi premiere of Sex and the City 2. And they invited all these women in media. And we were sitting and talking about what a disaster the film was. And we sort of clicked. And we started talking about our work and what we were interested in. And we said that we wanted to work on something together. So when she had interviewed Silas and she started to look into the story, she gave me a call after, I think it was 2011. And she said, I think this might be the thing that we could work on. Because community rights, homegrown solutions, local agency are things that we feel very strongly about. It's more prevalent, a theme that needs to be addressed than I think we give it credit for.
What was it that intrigued you or compelled you to want to work on this film?
The subject matter of, well, environmental issues, because that's really close to my heart. But not just that, it's someone from where it is that the problems are happening, the situations are happening, deciding to do something about it. And doing it on their own steam and pushing forward, that inspired me. That made me want to tell that story because it's a story that we need to hear. Because Silas is incredibly accomplished, but he's also very human. He's a guy you want to sit down and have a drink with. He's a person that you want to have a conversation with about things in everyday life, but he's also the person that you want to talk to about how you can make things better because he's got first-hand experience, and it's not bookish experience, it's being in the trenches. And 15 years is a good long time to know what it is that not would work, but what you're willing to do and whether or not you're willing to continue. And he has, to great success.
What is it what do you think, based on spending, how many years did you spend making this film?
5.
5 years. So yeah. Based on spending 5 years with it, what is it that keeps him going? Because I'm going to guess that there's an element of perhaps potentially danger for him in some way in doing the work he does.
Absolutely. He has had a couple of threats. They do try to be careful. In the beginning, he didn't really think about it much. He said the result and the work was more important than anything else. But I think he started to take it more seriously now because he does have family. And you can be, I think it's true of anyone that you don't think as seriously about yourself as you do your near and dear ones. So he does think about it more. But that hasn't seemed to stop him from doing what it is that he feels needs to be done.
And in making this film, what were some of the challenges that you faced? What would you say were the biggest challenges that you faced?
Well, first of all, wondering whether or not there would be an end in sight. Documentary, when you start a documentary, you never imagine how long it's going to take. You don't consider it you start a documentary because you believe this needs to get done. This is a story that needs to be told, and you want to make sure as many people share in this story as possible. But you don't think, so as the years clock by, as you're doing, because it's not just, the difficult thing is, and I think this is true of any documentary, it's about finding some way to keep the momentum when it's so easy to lose it. And when you feel like you have lost it, finding a way to pick it up again. And to just keep going. And to give it your best at every moment so that when you are finally done, you say, I stand by every decision.
So this was a collaboration, as you said, with yourself and Anjali. Like what? And anytime you have two people working on something, there are inevitably clashes, differences of opinion. What was that experience like for you? Was this the first time that you'd worked with someone as a co-producer?
Yeah. Directing with someone always starts out with the best of intentions, but then it just, like any relationship, I think that it's tested. Because you find yourself in situations where you're like, well, I don't even know how to begin to navigate that. But you do. And it was difficult, yes. But the thing that kept us there was that the reason why we started and the reason why we wanted to see it through was that the story mattered. And that took precedent over everything else. So we had a gripe, we dealt with it, we moved on. And I think the one thing that I would say is if you're going to get into a collaboration with anyone, you have to know how to fight. Not like who's better with machetes, but being able to have an argument or a disagreement where you can come out the other side and keep working.
And had you made films before this?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd made a couple of fiction projects and a couple of shorts. Also, they were all narratives, actually. So the documentary was quite specific, but it was specific because of the subject and the story.
And was it a different experience doing a narrative film versus doing a documentary film?
Yeah.
What would you say with
level of control? Easy. Level of control. Because in narrative, you build a world. Everything comes from an idea that you have, and then you trust that to someone to create a character, for example. I could not call Silas a character. He's a man, he's a person who has his own volition, who moves in his own direction. Yes, the inner workings of that is what I'm interested in, but there is no prediction of how that goes. And while you have a story, an idea that you signed on for, because things take time and because life happens, you have to reassess and stay true to the core of what it is that you were trying to say without holding on to it too tight, because it can get really difficult. Well, it was really difficult at some point for me to go, well, this is what's happening. It's like, no, but we can't have that. You can't run for politics. No. You're a community activist, and that's what you're doing. But to him, that was the natural progression of how it is that he could do more, because that's his interest, and it's worth considering. And it was quite the education for me to let go and understand and fully appreciate, you know what? This is his process. It doesn't make the core of what it is that we were trying to tell any different. It looks different, but the core of it does not.
So let's talk about a narrative project that you did. So Soul Boy.
Baba, ni nini? Si tuende?
Niache.
Kuliendaje?
Wamenichukua. Nimekwisha.
Baba. Duka imefungwa.
How did that come about? And what was that process like, bringing that story to life?
That was the exact opposite of this process, because it was very fast. It was very pressure cooker-like. So when Billy Kahora, the writer, was asked by Tom to write something, Billy, who had not written a screenplay before, but I think he did pretty well in this situation with that short story, Tom invited me to direct it. And it's really in my vein to push the boundaries of what's real and what's not. And he said, right. So once the script is finished, we'll get going. I said, excellent. When's it finishing? In 3 weeks. Excellent. 3 weeks. Get the script. We had a pre-production of maybe 2 weeks. We shot, I think it was 2 weeks. We shot for 13, 14 days, I think. And then we were editing for about a year.
A year?
Yeah.
Why did it take so long?
Because we shot for 13 days. And we were really feeling it. I don't know, it was a very organic, a very intuitive way of piecing the film back together. When we first put all the scenes together, there were elements that sort of just felt like there was just a bunch of little short films. And you had to find the full story, the entire line and arc in it. And that, for me, just took time.
Even though it was narrative, and you can create whatever you want. I mean, actually, just tell us, what was the story? What was the story that you ended up with?
Well, so Soul Boy, in its inception and at the end of it, is about a young boy, an early teen boy who lives in Kibera, who one morning finds his father completely hungover, but his father says that his soul has been stolen by the Nyawawa, which is this witch. And so Abila's job is to find this witch with the help of his friend, who is of a different tribe, to find out what it is that he needs to do to make sure that he can get his father's soul back. And she, after having found her with the goat leg, gosh, I haven't spoken about this in so long, she says...
It just sounds intriguing with the goat leg.
So she is a witch who has a goat leg, and she has, and she gives him seven tasks that are indicated by 7 suns that he needs to complete to success by the next sunset, so by Sunday evening. And as he does that, he is pushed and confronted by his friends, his mom at work, his environment, to do what he feels is important.
And so with that film, did you, at the end of it, I know it was a year-long process, probably much longer than you thought, did you end up with something that you were like, yeah, this is, yeah. I'm really happy with this? Yeah. Well, it received great acclaim, won awards and played at festivals and
yeah,
so
the thing is, when we were done, first of all, I was really glad that we were done, but I was also glad that we were done, and the project, all the choices that I made. Because when you watch a film, at least when I watch a film, for the first few times, what I watch, what I see when I see a scene, is all the decisions that I made that created that scene. I think about the idea of it. I think about the complications of choosing the shot. I think about the fights I had with my editor. I think about all those things that made that, and how all those decisions that you stand by create the thing that you've now called a film.
How did you become a filmmaker? Was it something you always knew you wanted to be?
I knew I always wanted to tell stories, and I wanted to tell stories that moved people, because that's what stories have done for me. I believe that stories are the thing that get us to think about who we are and how we sit in the world and inspire us to do things. So I thought I was going to be a short story writer, actually. And, well, obviously I'm not that. Well, not yet. I could still be. But filmmaking, I found, is a medium that allows a lot of all the different art disciplines to create something that has, when done right, such a visceral reaction. It has such an effect that it sneaks up on you sometimes, or sometimes it just sort of hits you. And it stays with you for better or worse, but it confronts what you know. I mean, all art does that, but there's a way that film does that, especially in the times that we live, that its impact is so much stronger. And that's why I chose to do it.
So you've just finished screening Silas. What's next for you? What are you working on? What's the next big thing that you're working on?
Next big thing.
Or little thing.
No, there's a couple of feature projects that I set aside to make while we were finishing Silas that I'll pick up again. So there's some rewriting that needs to happen. And maybe some rekeying, just to reacclimate to the stories. That's what's happening immediately.
And for you, what advice would you, so you're a filmmaker, you've had success with the films that you've made. What advice would you give to young women looking at you and saying, I'd like to be a filmmaker? Where do they start? What should they do? What are some of the things they should look out for?
If you want to make films, figure out what part of filmmaking you want to do, and then do all the research that you possibly can on the mechanics of what that discipline is, and then go out and get some experience and read. Because there's nothing like experience and there's nothing like discovering things for yourself. Because the thing about filmmaking is it's not a mental exercise. It's really about doing it and about trusting that the story is worth it. And that also it's a lot of work. There's this idea that filmmaking is incredibly glamorous, and I'm like, it's really not. I mean, you're standing with gumboots in the middle of some swampy stream trying to get the perfect shot, and you're not even sure if you're getting it because it's so hot that everything's just, the equipment is starting to just, act up, or you have to drive for 5 hours to get somewhere and then you realize, oh my goodness, there's nowhere to charge anything. Or you're trying to get this little moment and the character just decides that they're not doing it. Or my goodness, there's so many things. But you tough it out, you figure it out, you question yourself, and you keep going because it's worth it.
What was your family's response to you saying you wanted to be a filmmaker?
They were not impressed.
Why not?
Well, they wanted something that was a lot more secure. They thought being a lawyer or a doctor might be the better thing to do. Yeah, so they were all actually, not just my parents, all sort of face palming, going, God. But they've come round. Happily.
Now, speaking of family, when I was researching for this interview, I came across a campaign that you have online for your sister. Can you tell us about that?
My sister has sickle cell anemia, which is a blood condition that compromises how because your blood is so thick, it just changes how your body functions. And as a result, because there's different strains of sickle cell anemia, what my sister has as a result is very brittle bones, which have now resulted in her hip bones atrophying and her spine is now being compromised. So she needs a double hip replacement in the very immediate future. So we're raising funds for that.
And I'll definitely share when we post this, I'll definitely share the information of where people can go to donate the money. How is she doing?
She's doing well. So in this fundraising journey, our friends have been very generous. We had, before I came to Toronto, we had a concert, and that was run by a bunch of our friends. And we managed to raise some money, and just the outpouring of love and support has been amazing. It's not something it's something that you hope for, but when you're in the presence of it, it's unlike anything, and you realize, you know what, you can do it. It is possible. There is support.
So latching on to something you just said, it's something that you hope for. So I know you hope to raise the funds for your sister and for her to get better, but what do you hope for? What's your greatest hope?
That we understand that as individuals, we have agency, we have power, we have will that we could use to great effect. And it's not up to anyone else to do it. Because I feel like, especially in my generation, we're really good at articulating our problems and what we think should happen. But the action is lacking. And I think it's because of a general resignation and fatigue. And that's the thing that'll do us in.
And is that something that you face as a female, as a Black female filmmaker, is this resignation and fatigue? Is that what it is? Why do you think there are so few Black female filmmakers?
You see, when people ask me that, because they have asked me that, I think, well, in East Africa, most of the filmmakers are female. So
You see, this is actually part of why I wanted to do this project, because so rarely do we hear about them. There's one of the things that I've been learning as I've started down this path is there's a whole world of women, Black women, African women who are doing amazing things, but we never hear about them. And so our psyche is conditioned to be like, well, they don't exist.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you're doing this so that people see or hear at least and are curious enough to go look. Because the media, yes, I mean, we're really spoiled in this day and age and being spoon-fed, being bombarded with a lot of some of it which is just white noise. But yes, there are so many female filmmakers, African female filmmakers even, that are making very interesting, thought-provoking work. I mean, in East Africa alone, you've got Judy Kibinge, Wanuri Kahio, Wanjiro Cairo. I mean, my God, the list is good. It's a good, strong list. And it's not just directors either. It's, people, it's producers, it's sound designers, it's cinematographers. Is it still male heavy in the crew department? Yes, but the percentages are shifting.
That's good to hear. So things are changing.
Yes, they are. They're growing.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. And I'm so glad and thankful to have been able to spend time with you and to hear about the amazing work that you're doing and the messages that you're bringing forward in the films that you're making and the passion that you bring to your filmmaking. And I want to ask you one last question. So this project is called Ndini, which in my language, my mother tongue, Shona, means I am. Finish that sentence for me. I am.
I am work in progress, passionate, hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hawa. I really appreciate it. It's been such a joy spending time with you. Safe travels back home.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for everything that you've done.